Greetings. Welcome to the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track discussion of Fate, the Winx Saga. Now, like most of you, we were all very sad to hear that the show got canceled. And since season 2 did not air before con this year, we didn't do a panel at con. And I kind of figured that waiting a whole year to do one in person would be kind of a long time and that it would be more to our advantage if we had, got to have a discussion now and people could either watch it and take part in the discussion with us, or they can watch it later, whatever the case may be. So that's why we're doing it now. And first, the first thing I would like to do is have each of my wonderful panelists introduce themselves. And Evan, we'll begin with you. Oh, and when you introduce yourself, sorry, you gave me this idea, but I was going to have you do it now. Tell us, when you introduce yourself, how you got into the show. Did you watch any of the other show? Was it, Evan's got a good story. So anyway, go.
Evan Heisey. For those who may recognize me, I'm the tech hotel lead for Tech Ops at West End during DragonCon. I actually got into the saga assuming it was going to be a throwaway show. I needed something to watch during lunch one day and went from, wow, this is going to be a time kill to, oh, this is good. This is really, really good. It's been such a change from so much of the YA or recast of old shows that it's been a fascinating thing to watch. But I go on that for a bit. So next.
Yeah, well, that is a funny story though, when something surpasses your expectations. Kelly.
I'm Kelly Harkins. I'm another director at DragonCon, but I do the American Science Fiction Fantasy Media track. But of course, it's media, so it's like Carol and I are always very paying attention to what's dropping. So I also love Fae things, so I saw I had never watched the animated, none of that stuff. But when I see Wings and, all those kind of things, I was like, oh, I got to watch this. So that's how I kind of came on board with this. So that's my story.
Okay. Diana.
So I write stuff like this. So of course I wanted to watch stuff like what I write. I always do. I was addicted to Legacies, and same kind of sadness that I had when I heard that was canceled is pretty much what I felt too. So I heard it was coming out and I said to myself, I got to watch that one. And I did. And I really did like it for a lot of reasons. There were certain types of characters that you don't typically see on a show like that. So it was nice.
Yeah. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Puerta. I am on the Urban Fantasy track, and I also have an MFA in film and television, and I watch everything that is urban fantasy related, basically. So
yes,
if I see a show that's coming on that has any kind of fantasy element in it, I am going to be watching it. So there was not really any question.
Yes, and I can verify that typically when I ask Anna, well, have you been watching this yet? Oh, yes. Or, or if it's something that's not out yet, I'm going to be. Yeah,
yes.
Definitely.
It's on my list.
That's right. Marks.
Yeah, Marks Pyle. I'm a filmmaker, writer, podcaster. I do write some urban fantasy, so I'm always curious about urban fantasy stuff, and I like to see more Fae type stories. So I was really curious about this show. Had no idea about the cartoon or anything like that. I still haven't. I watched a few minutes of the cartoon after the end of season 2, just out of curiosity, because I saw that Netflix has it. But that's about it. but I was pleasantly surprised by it.
Okay, well, Seska, that was definitely perfect timing, because we are just now doing introductions. So go ahead and tell the good people, our viewers, who you are and then also just briefly how you got into the show. And I believe you had mentioned to me that you also watched the animated version.
Yes, I remember watching the animated version when it first came on. They've done a couple, like with comics, they've done a couple reiterations and updates and tweaks with it. But I remember watching it when it very first came on and loved it. But I'm Seska Small. I am one of the co-hosts of the Blasters and Blades podcast. And I'm often found at Dragon Con doing miscreant stuff like Carol does. But that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I do have a TikTok where I review books, and I'm starting to do some stuff talking about geek culture stuff, because that's what I do. That's who I am. And sorry for being late. I got stuck doing at a sports dinner thing. Who knew they gave awards to everybody?
Oh, honey.
I did competitive theater in school. I didn't pay attention.
I'm teasing you, but anyway, you're not late. You came in at just the right point. So
I'm a wizard, like Gandalf. So
yeah,
exactly what I'm supposed to.
So now my first question is, one of those that I guess is kind of that would be kind of obvious for a show like this, where there were so many different colorful and interesting characters. Is who was your favorite character and why? And then it's a two-part question. And which character in the show most surprised you throughout the run of the series, between from beginning to end? Who were you most surprised by? And they don't have to be the same person, of course, but anyway, Evan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, having come into this series cold when I first saw it, I didn't pay attention to a lot of the characters, but one of the ones, that's what stood out to the series about me so much. I really actually began to really like Tara as that initial character, because from a casting standpoint, she was atypical, especially to an American audience, and she had a strong role, was instantly recognizable as a separate character.
Right.
That's really one of the things that really pulled me into the show. As far as the second part of that, ones that surprised me over was, right now I blanked on her name. I'm terrible about that.
What did she do?
Without giving spoilers away, she comes in as the villain partway through season 1.
Oh, Beatrix.
Beatrix, yes. So I thought that was Beatrix. Yeah, for this style of show, I was really impressed with the growth arc on her. She did not move like I expected. I expected a much more one-dimensional character out of the introduction, and she just kept surprising me.
Okay, Kelly.
I think a lot of us will agree about Tara, because she was definitely the every person kind of vibe to her. So on that aspect of it, but I'm going to say Saul, partially because I love the actor. But
I know, when I saw him, I was so excited. I was like, Thomas.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh my God, he's in this, is so good. So I was very excited about that. And I liked kind of seeing it, especially in season 2, when they kind of developed a lot more. He was a lot more dimensional in season 2. And honestly, to me, even though he's technically a background character, I still think it was one of the strongest stories that kind of went in, from betrayal to revelations, without going into super detail. So I thought there was a lot of cool things, and I loved kind of seeing that. I really wished we could have seen more of all that if we had a 3rd season. So that's kind of where I'm going.
Gotcha. Okay, Diana.
Okay, so at the beginning, I really thought that Musa was my favorite character, but it's really Aisha. I kind of wasn't Aisha. I was a little too straight-laced, trying to do what I was supposed to do at school. And some of the time it would get me into more trouble than if I didn't try so hard to walk the straight and narrow. And I felt like she really had a good story. So I enjoyed that. The other thing, the character who surprised me really was Stella. I just expected her to be a mean girl.
Right, the whole time. Yeah.
Yes, and she was a very dynamic character, so I was surprised, and I was glad that they did something more with her than that.
Okay, Anna.
You're muted, dear.
Of course I am. So I think Musa was my favorite character sort of starting. I also did like Bloom a lot. Just being the main character, and Fire. I like Fire. But
Oh, okay.
but I really liked Musa, and I liked sort of her powers, and I thought her arc was really interesting with Sam. And so I really enjoyed her character. I think the one that surprised me the most was probably maybe Riven.
That's yeah.
It's like I kept thinking he was going to go one way, and then it kind of went another way, and sort of back and forth with him. And I ended up really liking him more than I thought I would after the sort of first turn. I was like, oh, I'm going to at the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to like him. He's kind of like the bad boy. And then I was like, no, I don't think I like him. He's being mean to Tara.
Right.
And then he turned it back around on, and I ended up liking him again. So
okay, Marks.
It fluctuates a little bit. I think in season 1, I really like Bloom and Tara quite a bit. Not that I didn't like them in season 2, but I feel like Musa, her like conflict with her powers and stuff, was really interesting, and wanting to try to become a specialist. So she kind of shined a little bit in season 2 for me, and then also Flora added an interesting new dynamic, and she's really intelligent like Tara, but kind of a wild card, and whenever she acts, so those kind of shook things up. And I think like with some of you said, one of the things that the show does really interesting is their villains kind of layered, and they kind of like they're in this grayish area where they keep going back and forth, and you're not sure, like you kind of like them sometimes, you kind of don't, like Riven and Beatrix, and even maybe even to a certain extent Rosalind, almost, at least enough to fool Bloom, because she's got some reasons why she's doing what she's doing too, in a way. But so that show does a good job with their villains.
Okay, and Seska.
I really liked Musa. Musa was also the one that I thought they had the hardest time with, because in the cartoon she's a tech fairy, and so she was an entire and I was like, how are they going to do this? Because they have a very Harry Potter world-esque setup. Like, how is this going to look? So I was very surprised with that, and I loved how they kind of covered some of the classic plot points from like X-Men with Jean Grey about, the morality when you can feel everybody's emotions, like how their privacy isn't necessarily as private as they think. And I loved that. I really enjoyed that a lot, and how she developed. And because I always kind of felt Musa was she was a music and tech fairy in the show, which was cool, but it also didn't jive as well, I thought, with everybody else being more nature-based. So I really liked how they did it with her as a mind fairy. As I said, because I watched one of the early renditions of the Winx Club. Because of that, I think I liked her. Although I do feel bad that nobody's mentioning Sky as being their favorite character. Poor guy, he just tried so hard.
Kind of cliche, though.
I'm not saying he's not cliche, but we can still love a cliche. But
there ended up being more to him than first appeared.
Yeah, I think Riven was a very he was a bully, but he was a much more complex bully in some ways than I would give them for. Normally, I'm used to the American male bully jock being very anti different lifestyles and stuff like that, whereas he was like, no, sure, we'll do it because that's fun to manipulate people with, which I'll give them credit for at least being different.
Right. Well, now here, our friend Renita says that Riven was definitely surprising. So he seems to be one of the number one choices for who could surprise you. But I like that. I like a show personally that keeps me on my toes as long as it makes sense. I don't mind being surprised as long as the surprise makes sense ultimately.
I think there was a lot of surprises within it, which was good, but I think also may have been the thing that audiences and Netflix execs didn't necessarily feel comfortable with, which is a shame.
Yeah, I don't know. Now, one of the other things that my next question has to do with the adult portrayals on the show, and this is always very interesting to me because when you have main characters, or in this case, we had the focus on a main character, but we have this essentially teen ensemble cast or young adult ensemble cast, however you want to describe them, and how they interact with the adults on the show is pretty important considering it's set at a school. But sometimes the adult portrayals there's something that always interests me because they don't always hit the mark, I think. And that's one thing I always appreciated about Teen Wolf. It was things like that. So I'm curious about how you guys feel about how they did that with some of the some of the adult characters on the show. And Kelly, you're up first this time.
Well, the one that strikes me first, beyond all that I said earlier, is Tara and Sam's dad. That is a real striking one. Seeing how torn he is over it, wanting to protect his kids,
Right.
And the relationship between them all, I think, is a pretty solid one. You can see the kids feel as strongly about dad as dad feels about them, and it wasn't just the cliche, typical family in that sense. But I would have liked to have seen a little more of that. And I do think they kind of took the easy way out at the end with him. But that's where I'm thinking, kind of what Sesko is saying, is they left so many, hooks open by the end of the season that I think that hurt it. So in that sense.
Yeah, we will talk about that. We will get there.
I figured you would.
Diana.
So I have to say that I liked that the adult characters didn't always stay around and they weren't there through the entire series. We were given a headmistress who, was missing, presumed dead for most of season 2.
I like to think that's how McGonagall would have been if she'd been the headmaster of Hogwarts.
Yeah, maybe. But, I feel like that ambiguity was important when it came to the dynamic with the rest of the adults, especially since Stella's mother is the queen. Having this, this one person kill the headmistress and then take over plot is utterly implausible when you have a character whose mother is the ruler of the area. You can't do that unless there's really some big reason why the authorities aren't coming down on the bad guy. So I thought it was good that we didn't keep and the lessons that they learned from their first headmistress were very different from the second. It provided a contrast. I think that's very realistic when it comes to kids in high school. They don't have as much consistency with their teachers. They have different teachers in like American high schools anyway, different teachers over the course of the day, and every year it's different teachers too. So it more having things more in flux kind of felt like more genuine. And then there was Sebastian. Sebastian coming in season 2 as this person who is like, yeah, I know a guy. And I'm from Rhode Island, and that's like the state of I know a guy. So you know a guy and you're kind of in, and people will sort of believe you and take what you say at face value and give you a chance. And so of course they did, much to their dismay, an eventual severe difficulty. Then they had to worry about people believing that, him over them, and all of his connections. So they really made things very complex in terms of positioning the adult characters. As far as their portrayals, they got a little mustache twirly at times, especially Sebastian once he had revealed himself to the main characters. So I feel like that part was plot devicey, but I did appreciate that the adults were just all super adulty. We even had some who were a couple of minor characters that showed up at that banquet who were just, this is an incompetent buffoon that everybody tolerates for some unknown society reason.
Right.
Everybody has that drunk uncle.
Yes.
Yeah. Stella's uncle was kind of a piece of work. Yeah.
So
Interesting grouping. Anna.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of I almost saw the group of adults as like the previous group of teens in a way. Like these were all people that like grew up together and they used to be the main characters, and they're like, I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
no, it feels like
where
has
they had their own there could be a prequel show about all of these Sebastian, Silva, Andreas, Rosalind, and like figuring their shit out when they were 20, and really messing it up, obviously.
Yeah. Right.
Legacy. It had that same kind of feel like Legacies has when you watch it. Or
yes,
what is this book that I just read earlier? Oh yeah, the Gallow Hills Academy, where it's like the children from another series. I don't know, D.R. Perry.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
The adults make their mistakes in the past.
And it did feel like a lot of the plot of the show was the teens uncovering the adults, mess ups from when they were younger. And so I don't know. I enjoyed sort of that aspect of it. And I loved Tara's and Sam's dad, and I hated Queen Luna, and sort of like all of the things that you're supposed to feel. But
you felt those things.
I felt those things.
Yeah,
but I really enjoyed the Silva and Andreas and Sky dynamic. I thought they played that well, but I did think it got a little repetitive, like Bloom sort of looking for a mother figure and Sky kind of looking for a father figure. I got a little tired of it at like some point, where I was like, okay, let's just do something else.
It didn't end up well, in most cases. So Marks.
Yeah, because in YA you need to get those parents out of the way so the teens can be the heroes, right, or young adults. But you don't want them to look like they're terrible parents or something.
Oh no! That is totally the trope of YA. That is
I know they usually are terrible parents,
which is why there are some YA books I love and some YA books that test my love of books.
But I think they did a good job of Tara's dad, as Kelly said, and I like the whole Saul dynamic with Sky and Andreas. I do like how there's a history here and stuff, and I almost felt like they were going to go somewhere with like class warfare kind of thing with the Fae using their magic powers. They're kind of incompetent royalty or something that are like manipulating or badly manipulating the rest of the world, because I guess everybody else has magic and these blood witches. The world building needs a little help because I don't quite 100% understand the dynamics of this world. But I was wondering if they're going to go somewhere like that, because once we had that class reunion thing, they all seem very, not the greatest people, right? That are really. Yeah, hoity-toity, yeah. and the mom, the prince, excuse me, the queen, she must know that Rosalind murdered or did something, right? She kind of like is kind of going to let that slide because there's a war hero, in there, and she probably wants to get rid of the Blood Witches too. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting political dynamics that they could do. And yeah, and you know what? And it does, Kelly telepathically communicated to me right now about how there's some similarities of Vampire Academy. And I started watching Vampire Academy, and I'm like, it's reminding me a lot, like the dynamics of those one day vampires and the Dampiers with the Fae and the Fairies and the protect or specialists.
Yeah, the specialists and the guardians. I thought I was going to say the wrong words when we got on here because I've watched Vampire Academy since I watched, and I was I'm gonna say that because they're so similar.
I watched them at the same time, because they were overlapping part of it, and I was like,
came out,
wait, which one? Okay, I'm not the only one.
I did like that they didn't do in the cartoon, because in the cartoon it was very much like if you were a fairy, you were a girl when the cartoon first started, and if you were a boy, you got to be and had magic, you got to be a specialist. And so, like later on in the cartoons, they kind of blurred it, but I liked that they started with you could be either, no matter your gender.
Right.
So that was definitely something I think that they changed world building wise for the better. But one of the things I loved about it that wasn't divergent, I haven't seen the show, I've only ever watched the movie Vampire Academy, was the fact that the adults were not all toxic.
Right.
They had like less than great. Some of them had some toxic traits, yes, and one or two of them were definitely toxic, but they were kind of supposed to be toxic.
Right.
But it wasn't every adult is toxic, every adult is bad. And I guess also as a mom and a single mom, I like the Stella and her mother dynamic. I really saw, and I was like, it was really kind of informative, and it was nice to see somebody actually talk about in their show. For kids, we forget sometimes that our parents at one point or another to us are gods. They're like little demigods. Right. For kids, and that dynamic of her trying to figure out and trying to please her mom so hard, and her mom being happy but not always happy because, like, okay, yeah, you did it, but you didn't do it the right way type thing. I liked the fact that you had a full spectrum of well-rounded, not flat character adults, and a variety of relationships, along with the Bloom's mom and dad adopting her. And adopted parents, they don't always know what they're getting into. Parent really does. But with adopted parents, there's a mystery to an adopted child, because you don't know the family history necessarily, and even if you do, it may not be as complete as you think it is. And so,
especially not if said child is a changeling.
But
fire powers, but
it was great to see that, and because we don't have a lot of characters on TV who are dealing with being adopted and stuff. So I have an aunt who was adopted and did Thanksgiving with her, and it was very interesting to hear some of how she related to things. So it definitely brought home the reminder of, we don't really see that many characters. So.
Yeah. Okay. Evan, what about you?
Yeah, a lot of the high points have been hit that I caught too, but I think very particular that's been mentioned kind of around is that the adults came in fully formed. There was no, other than certain points of the story that were plot points, like the team being high school graduates and destroying the Blood Witch Village, there was no attempt to explain the background of the adults. There were these fully formed individuals who had lived a life and were now running the school. And it was this insurmountable wall to the kids. And in a lot of young adult stories, that wall's not there. They try to make either the adults tend to be too much friends with the kids, or they try to make them too much of a part of the show and their backstory important, even when it's not. Because you want to say, no, we don't care. They're as far from, so we got a very much a student's point of view of the adults.
Yeah, and there is a couple of times though where they even make comments like, well, most parents are trying to do the best they can. And I thought that was an interesting thing for, that the teens were saying this about the parents in general.
Yeah, and it was really kind of the neat interaction. It's like with the tragedy that Andreas, Silva, and how all that rattles out. And then you finally discover that you've got Beatrix in there as a substitution for missing son, even if it was did not agree with a conscious choice on Andreas's part.
Okay.
Names back right there, yeah. And Saul. But then you got the difference to that one to Bloom, the Queen, and all of them. They're just very dynamic interactions of all the types of families. And all of this creates a sudden contrast for Bloom, who gets to see all of this and go, but where are my parents?
Right. Yeah. Which the whole time is, for the first season anyway, that was pretty much her whole goal was to find that out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a few of you have mentioned some things about the world building and all of that within the show, but one of my questions for you is, and you can pick some aspect of this to mention, is that I wonder if were you satisfied with the way that things were revealed, as we went along, either matters of plot or the world building. And the reason I say that is that it was literally the 5th episode of the first season before it was even mentioned that specialists didn't have magic. And I guess I just assumed that they were all fairy. You know what I'm saying? That they called them specialists. And I thought there was something that it would have been useful to know. And there's something else I would mention too, but I'll leave. I'll just, this is an example of what I'm asking you, is if you thought there was something like that. And I don't mean, I'm not talking about unanswered questions, because we'll get to that as our last point, but just, things that you felt as though you didn't find out about soon enough. Does that make sense? Just that you were kind of thrown in there. It's like throwing somebody who doesn't know how to swim into a pool, I guess. But anyway, and Diana, you're up first this time.
Okay. So yeah, the specialists not having magic, I had assumed, and it did take kind of too long to reveal that, because I had assumed they had some sort of like, it only affects their own physical selves magic, some kind of kinetic magic maybe, or body control. So to me that was sort of like, well, that's their thing, because they're doing. So one of the things my husband was talking about with me when we were watching a show is like, that's impossible as a fight move. It's physically impossible to use that as a fight move effectively. And I was like, well, maybe they've got their magic. And that's what we thought for 5 episodes. And then it was like, oh, that's not their magic. That could have been done better. They could have said that's what it was. The second season might not have held up well with these magic devouring things, but they could have said it was psychic, or a body chemistry thing, or a biological thing. They could have explained that better. Another thing is, the magics are, people have the same type of magic and do totally different things. Tara and her brother are both earth fairies, and yet their magic manifests like just completely differently. I would never expect that he was an earth fairy until it was mentioned either. So the more consistency with the magic, I think, across the board, or an explanation as like, there's underground earth and there's surface earth. They could have explained the magic, or had, especially since they're at a school, and Bloom doesn't know anything about magic, she could have asked a question like that of a professor. They could have showed them in class a couple times. Sometimes they did that in early seasons of Legacies, where, you know, somebody would ask a question, or they'd ask the headmaster, or they'd go, you know, ask each other about a study note. And it would be a way to get that information out there, that world building information out there. And as an author of Academy books, it's a device. Use it.
Yeah. Yeah, there are many that you could, yes. Anna.
Let me unmute.
Yeah.
So I agree. There was some things in the beginning where I was just sort of catching up, and you know, I've watched a lot of fantasy shows, so for the most part, I kind of expect everyone to have some sort of thing going on. So I was surprised that the specialists didn't have magic, or anything. You know, like even if they just sort of had like more speed or agility, you know, like something that would make them better fighters or something. I would kind of expect that. But then I also wanted them to sort of talk about the blood witches more, and the fact that the Aisha's boyfriend, Gray, was able to like pass as a specialist when he was actually a blood witch, like, and got into the school. Like, I don't know what their process is for like admissions, but clearly it's not great. So like I was like,
yeah,
how do they identify the blood witches? Like, are there not, you know what I mean? So anyways, I just had a few questions that I think maybe they would have answered eventually, if it wasn't canceled. But you know,
Marks.
it was.
Yeah, I would like some more world building stuff. I think a lot of script writers get taught to not tell that stuff, right? You know, like the exposition, you know. Yeah. But I think you kind of need to establish. I mean, you sprinkle it in there over time, but you need to kind of understand the dynamics of the world and stuff, so you're not distracted by it, right? You're not sitting there going, "Well, I don't understand specialists of magic," and you're not paying attention to the story. You know, you're distracted. To me, the mystery should be stuff that's plot stuff that's going to have reveals. You know,
right?
There's no reason to hold back. Like, no, specialists don't have magic. Surprise! You know, that wasn't going to be a surprise. They just should have noticed that, because it's like, so what? You know. So there's a majority of people on this world human, you know, are they different than normal humans? Are specialists all humans then? You know, how are they selected? You know, there's a lot of stuff, you know, do they interact or manipulate the real world, the earth world, the first world, I guess? You know, how's that relationship in the other world and the first world? I think that's really, really interesting stuff, really. And plays really well into this whole, you know, the war that was going on between the blood witches and the fairies. So I think that's a lot of cool stuff to explore that that I think but within 2 seasons they should have touched on a little bit more. And that's a missed opportunity, I think, that they could have played with. And maybe that's in Winx stuff, or maybe they've dramatically changed it from the cartoon. I don't know, but it's too bad. I'd like to see a little more of it.
Yeah, and we should say that Renita Goyle has said that she thinks that the show assumes.
Yeah, I was going to say that at the end.
That the viewers might have had some history watching, and then that the witches were definitely an aspect that was missing or lacking.
Yeah, and I think some scriptwriters do that. Like, I think there's been some movies that have come out, like they're comic book based, like you know stuff because you read the comic book, and I don't think you should approach it that way. I think you should approach it as if these are brand new people and they don't know anything, you know, and don't hide it. Don't make them look it up on Wikipedia.
That is how we do it on the Urban Fantasy Track. Okay. Yeah.
I think in some ways it wasn't necessarily. I think part of the problem is they're used to world building, like the Winx universe crew is used to world building for younger audiences. and they scaled this up. And there's a lot of things younger audiences, they just don't care and they don't think about and aren't really, they're not worried at like 8, 10, 12 necessarily on some of these aspects of world building. I mean, some of them I'm definitely sure are, because there are some who are very advanced in their thought process, and then there are some who go, ooh, cartoon, turn off brain.
Well, some of them also fill in those details themselves in a kind of fanfic pretend play way.
Yeah, and that's some of it. They leave some of those things, and I think that was one of the challenges that coming in, having known the background from being a children's show, that I was interested to see how they played it up and aged up the storylines. And I think the world building aspect is one where they fell a little off kilter.
Okay, Evan.
I'm going to kind of be a little counter to everybody else in world building, I think, here. One of the problems I have with a lot of the YA stuff coming out on Netflix, and even the urban fantasy that's coming out in a lot of the series, is they use them too far the other direction on too many of the shows, where you lose the plot in the world building. And while there's from weak spots, the specialist that one of them, I like the very clean world building as it happened. You saw the world as Bloom did. You didn't get a lot of extra information she wouldn't have. So as you went forward, it was a very nice, clean view of the world, introducing things that they generally became important to the story or to the character arc. I mean, knowing the specialists weren't magical in the beginning could have been useful, but it could have also opened up this whole realm of, now we have to write all this information on why there are normal humans in the fairy academy.
It's like we've only got 6 episodes. We have to do that in the first season.
As a planning choice, keeping that I think was good, and it worked well. Though it did, make sometimes the questions, oh, they must be using physical magic. They tried to address that in the second season a little bit when Musa wanted to be trained as a specialist, and Riven and then come out and go, you can't just be a specialist. It's a selection process. It's elite training, and it's done from really young.
Right, or they get chosen. They're selected, is what he's
stuff. For reference, those who don't know, my background is I am a martial arts instructor, an Olympic fencer, and when dealing with kids, starting from a very young age, one of my favorite stories was I had a very young child black belt who's 8 years old, who was able to do things, aerial kicks and techniques. For lack of a better word, he Looney Tuned them. Because he didn't know he couldn't float in the air, he could pull off some incredible aerodynamic movements because he didn't think he couldn't do it. So he just tried it and was successful. And I think that was one of the ideas they thought the specialists, because they're trained so early and potentially in an environment where, hey, there's nothing we can't do if we don't try it. They're able to become more agile and better fighters than potentially they would starting later in life, like Musa does, which was kind of the point they tried to make in the second season.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that they're stuck with a bunch of fairies all the time who do have magic. It's just kind of an interesting contrast.
Laws do not apply here.
What's that?
The laws do not apply here.
That's right. That's right. Kelly, what about you? What was missing for you, or did you like the way that they revealed things?
Well, I'm kind of with everybody else. I definitely think they could have done more. I kept thinking, that's why I was kind of curious to hear Seska's answer on that, since she's the one who knew the original, is yes, okay, you are going from maybe assuming that most of your audience is the older version of the kids who watch the animation version. And you might be like, okay, well, they know this stuff. We don't have to build it in. But that seems a poor assumption because they're not those kids anymore. And then it's like, it felt like there was no show Bible because of that, that if you're going to write, you have these concepts in it. And that's where in the first episode, you don't have to throw everything in the first episode. But like we were saying, when Bloom gets introduced and she doesn't know this world at all, that's a great touch point to do those things.
Right.
So even if you don't want to slam a whole episode of exposition on, hey, this is it, but that is part of the point of those characters. So But
Right.
yeah, I think they could have done a lot more getting that relationship. I kept trying to figure out, Stella's mommy, like, wait, what? She's the queen of it, but where does the queen fit into the rest of the world? And so trying to figure out that was confusing.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you the thing that bothered me. Well, the specialist thing just surprised me because I've got in my notes I have specialists don't have magic with a question mark. I was like, it had not really occurred to me before, but I just assumed it. But the burned ones, it's like we never really are told where they came from or what they what they were all about, and I thought that was unfortunate. Since they were, something to be so afraid of.
I felt like I didn't mind that they didn't show them, but I felt like they didn't end it either. Like you said, what's missing? And my first answer was an actual ending.
yeah. We'll get to that.
I mean, I will admit I was watching it because I was traveling and I was watching it on my laptop. I was so eager to see it. I did not want to wait to get home to the big screen, and I shook my laptop. No!
Oh, and you have to be careful not to take
the
it
most
out
mature moment. My son was not there to watch it.
And
I feel like
go ahead.
I feel like for certain mysteries, like who created the first ones or what who's controlling or whatever, I feel like maybe they were going to reveal that in season 3. Maybe that has something to do with the shadow thing. But I feel like
that could be, yeah.
When a writer what they need to do to let the audience know they didn't forget is to have the characters bring that up occasionally. Like, man, we never did find out, who, whatever. Yeah. So we know they didn't just drop the plot.
I will say, in defense of the show,
to fix the series.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a solution. We get Perry to have them give her a contract to write the novels of it. We're good. She's not liking this idea.
I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with those burned ones, because where did they come from? Where did they go? They're Cotton Eye Joe. I don't know. That was horrible. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, in defense of the writers and that they did pack a lot into these 12 episodes, 13 episodes.
13,
how many?
Yeah.
I mean,
do you think they packed
to only
too much?
get 6 episodes in season 1? They did do a lot in there, and I'm sure they probably wanted to do more and just didn't have the time for it. The screen time for it. And so I bet in season 3 they had some really great stuff planned that we're just never
going to reveal everything.
I don't think it necessarily was a screenwriter's problem or even a series Bible problem. I think it's a not enough time problem, and that is one of the things, the drawbacks to the streaming shows. If they don't hit big with numbers, then they don't get a chance to really build out what they've presented.
Yeah.
Watch early, watch fast.
Well, here, Renita said that when she was watching the first season, she expected Beatrix to be a witch and faking the fairy powers. Now that's interesting because I hadn't really thought of that. But
I actually did too when Beatrix was first introduced.
Yeah. I thought she was going to be a blood witch too.
Is she in the cartoon?
Yes.
Okay. Are the blood witches in the cartoon? Do they have blood witches?
I don't remember, but I do remember Beatrix had this villain, not really a villain, or a villain.
She was the main girl art.
And it was 20 plus years ago. So we won't go into how long ago it was that I watched that.
Now, my next question has to do with what aspect of the show did you enjoy the most? Was it the world building? Was it the characters? Was it the magic system? What part of it kept you coming back? Which aspect of it? And Anna, you go first.
I don't know that it had to keep me coming back, because I could watch a whole season in a day with only 6 episodes. But I think it was the characters and sort of their arcs and relationships with each other. Obviously, I love a beautiful fantasy backdrop to all of that. But I think the characters for me.
Okay. Marks.
I think the character relationships, especially with the main female characters, helped hook me to it, but also that kept me wanting to come back for season 2, especially is some of the twists, like the big, the murder scene in the end of season 1, for example, and some of the other twists you get. Because how could you not want to watch season 2 after season 1's ending? It's like the bad guys won and they've taken over, and what's going to happen?
Right.
So that was a bold story move, and I was curious about that. But they still, the core main characters are still very relatable and interesting. So it's not just like a roller coaster ride, like a Michael Bay film or something where there's so many story twists. There's the character relationships are also important.
Okay. Seska.
What was the question again? Sorry.
Well, what aspect of the show did you most enjoy? Was it the world building, the characters?
I loved the characters, and it felt like a really great world that hasn't been done in urban fantasy quite yet for me, or at least not in urban fantasy TV content, because most of that, vampires, werewolves, oh my, it doesn't, or there's like the Monster of the Week shows, but this one had a lot. I liked the twists and turns. I liked seeing them aging up something from being a kid show, which I've seen a couple cases where they the School for Good and Evil is another one that kind of, and as well as the Shadow and Bone, when they made it into a media acted out property, they ended up aging it up from the original intended audiences. But I really liked and truly respects the craft that they brought into doing some of that from a storytelling perspective, as well as the actors. I think in some ways, the things that hosed the show were the short seasons, which is why I got distracted. I was typing in a long answer about some of that in the commentary, but Carol can yell at me later for that.
Yeah.
But because it's so short, it's really hard for an audience to jive on a show and the show creators to make adjustments. My favorite example of that is Felicity Smoke from Arrow. Originally, they were going to kill her off by the end of season 1. Then they started bringing her in more because they realized halfway through airing the season that the audiences loved her, so they kept her. And that was an amazing thing for the show. But plus the short season, which means you only have 6 episodes, and then it got hosed by COVID and the long season break in between. So because there wasn't enough content, so people got tired of watching the same 6 shows, which is what sci-fi used to do back in the dark ages of the 90s. I might have been watching a lot of sci-fi at the time.
Okay, Evan, what was your favorite aspect?
Honestly, again, theater background and performance background, I really enjoyed so much the technical aspects of the show, which the reason I turned it on initially with the aspect of being basically a disposable show from a story arc was that the film work was really good. I mean, I expect a lot from Netflix, but the casting was excellent. The subtitling was on point. I am also, hard of hearing, so I've watched a lot of shows that you look at it and it's like the story is one thing in the dialogue verbally, and it's a second story in the subtitling. And this was the things that kept me coming back to the show were some of the very technical stuff. The story was really good. It avoided one of the pitfalls that I have with a lot of the short season or current urban fantasy in general sometimes coming out of everybody's got to be a romantic interest. Yeah, there were definitely romantic interests in the show, no question, but each one served a plot point to drive the story forward rather than just being
romance for romance sake.
Yeah. So there was a really nice, again, part of the short season caused them a little bit of trouble and may have forced some of this too, is it kept the story stayed very on point throughout without a lot of unnecessary side trails. There were red herrings and misdirections, but there was not, hey, we've got 2 episodes of this thing that has no bearing on the show.
Right. They didn't have time for that either. But yeah, no, you're right. It wasn't as though there was wasted space, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly?
I kind of agree with Marks. I was kind of really curious about a lot of the conspiracies, and they had enough like red herrings out there, and the stuff with Sebastian really did fool me. I was like, what? So until I started getting a little suspicious. But so a lot of that was really curious. I agree that the design of the school, I'll live in that courtyard. That was just beautiful.
I know. Yeah.
Okay, name a single room other than the basement that you wouldn't want to live in.
Those dorm rooms.
That's the best headmaster office ever. I would move in there.
Yeah. So yeah, all of that was beautiful. But yes, and Netflix, I'm not surprised with that. But yeah, to me, I can't quite blame the short season, because I'm sorry, we have seen other shows with short seasons who have been successful. So I think, if they had tightened it, not tried to do so much, it would have been better on that aspect.
I could see cleaning it up, definitely, but I do think it had, if you compare it to like The Witcher, it had a much longer season in between season break.
Yeah, they did. They did get stuck.
And then and then I read an article that talked about it. So during some of this, in the background, Winx got reshuffled because it's being filmed in the UK, and apparently it got reshuffled. It's an American show designed for Americans, but it got put into the UK bucket because of being filmed there, which meant the execs in charge had very different sensibilities of what works for them, because they're working for a different audience. And the article I read, they talked with one of the original creators behind all of the Winx stuff and everything, and it seemed that didn't quite jive, and that's part of what it was, just like a casualty to COVID and the reshuffling, I think, in part. So I do think that there were things that could have fixed it to make it more solid, but
I can kind of see that UK production influence a little bit in the show.
Yeah.
It's different than how things are done here.
Yeah, their sensibilities are different, and that's not bad. They're just different. So is peanut butter and vanilla. So,
well, fun fact: there was a significant break. They were all set to come to Con in 2021.
I know. I was so excited,
but then they couldn't because they had to go film season 2. So that was our chance, and that happened.
So many good shows got killed by COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
COVID has so much to answer for.
It does, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Diana.
Okay, so things I liked about the show. Everybody's already mentioned the set, but I really enjoyed the costumes. Everybody had their own sort of look, and it really helped define the characters. Yeah. And it was another aspect of the characterization that I really liked it. It did a lot, I think, for the actors physically being present in the characters. I felt like all of those actors, they just were whole body actors, and the costumes lent themselves to that sort of direction or technique they were taking with the acting. The characters really made the show. And yes, things like accessories and gadgets. Kelly mentioned in the chat that that binding gem they used on Stella. Oh my God, it was horrifying, but it was pretty. It was a pretty little bauble, but oh my God, it's just like, ooh.
I will admit, one of the things Netflix has done consistently, I think the best over sci-fi and other places, is they do put in the production value to make it good.
Yeah. The flip side of Stella's was the bracelets that restricted the magic I like the way they work those.
At the end, they looked awesome, and like from a they were just wonderfully done and horribly looking. They looked painful.
Yeah, they were horrifying and gorgeous at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Now-
I could totally see being a Fae thing.
Yes.
Yes, and the different applications, the magic having different applications is something that Renita appreciated. So, yes, agreed. Okay, so we are getting down to our last couple of points here, but tell me of the relationships, and I'm talking about friendships, not romantically inclined at all, but just the ones that were friend relationships, whether it was between the students or the adults. Which one did you find most satisfying and enjoyable? And Marks, you go first this time.
I think one of the most surprising ones that developed was Stella and Beatrix. So I think for this, especially this second season, seeing their friendship develop, both kind of slightly mean girls, but
Right.
but being kind of open to each other with their flaws and what they're wanting, their dreams and stuff too, or they're being vulnerable around each other, I guess, a little bit. And made it more sad whenever Beatrix died, right? I don't know if Stella wasn't so upset if I would care as much that she sacrificed herself.
Well, that's true. It was the effect that it had. We had come to care about Stella more, so you see her reaction, and that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes us
Well, they
care
were
that
both
much more.
kind of outliers, in the I mean, in the beginning, Stella kind of set herself apart, and so that I think that's probably what drew them together. Seska, what about you?
I'm actually going to say the relationship between Sky and Stella was one I enjoyed really watching and finding to be a very satisfying relationship that we don't normally see much of. Because it's very clear that they have a relationship, that they were friends, but they were also romantically involved, and then that's separating and trying to do that where you're still living, because it's a boarding school. I mean, I had exes when I was in the Army who it's awkward when you have to still live and work in the same area, right? But also that entire like Stella learning that she can't really manipulate them. She needs to change things, how she's interacting with them, and then finding those boundaries and a way to friendship, I thought was really great. And I think honestly, for when I watch shows sometimes as an adult that are geared towards teenagers, I want to see some things that I would like role modeled more in youth, and seeing those struggles, that is possible, that you can be a friend. What?
That you can have that.
That you can have a friend who was more go to a different box and go to being a friend, or just a male friend of the opposite gender, like that. I think that's important, and we need to have that for kids to see. And but I really enjoyed watching that relationship develop, and her also going, you know what, just because I'm not with them anymore, struggling with that, I may not be with them, but you can't be with them. And her finally going, I'm just going to get out of the way.
Right. Yeah. Evan, which ones did you enjoy the most?
It's going to probably be Tara and Musa.
Oh, okay.
Dynamically opposite characters. Normally, you'd see those two character types paired up in antagonistic relationships, and yet, despite how opposite, there's a level of, and you see it develop over the course of the shows towards the end, a level of both respect and understanding between the differences of the two. Tara wants to make Musa more people friendly, pull her out of her shell, but it's never overly forceful about it. There's always that level of, and for lack of a better word, consent in any attempt to engage with her or push her to join the rest of the girls in the room. And I found that was a very, again, as Siska said, a role model type thing that's really not seen a lot, and it's good to see in the show. And then, of course, there was the big five-way dynamic of all the girls in the suite going from, we don't want anything to do with this new person, and why are we stuck with, and really, the original impression is this plant girl, to becoming this tight-knit group of 5 or 6 really close friends. It was a nice evolution. It wasn't forced. It wasn't automatic. You got to watch it evolve over 2 seasons.
Right. Okay, Kelly.
I'm gonna probably pick a real cliche one, but I'm gonna bring up the Flora and Tara relationship because, granted, I feel like Flora was brought in deliberately for that purpose, but it came somebody who had a similar, because she was an Earth Fairy too. And initially that, she's my best friend, but now she's competition. But now, and then of course, opening Tara's eyes to, what she knew about herself, but didn't know about herself on that aspect. So I like that, seeing that. I do feel like she was an evolved plot device, but at least they did make her a one-dimensional plot device. She ended up having her own dimension, and in that sense is why it kind of elevates it to me rather than that. So that's my take.
Yeah, Tara got some of the best quotes in the show too.
Yeah, Flora was definitely one of those characters that could have been a drop-in, but still managed to be very dynamic to the story and the season 2.
Agreed. Diana?
Riven and Sky.
Okay. Good one. Yeah.
So, you have these 2 guys and they're very clearly rivals on the battlefield and in their training. One is a bully and the other one is trying to be kind. Maybe sometimes too much. And they're roommates and they're friends, and they often give each other the advice they most need to hear but don't want to hear. And I think that's important. And they did it without like throwing blows at each other outside of the sparring ring. So outside of practice, they weren't in like these physically antagonistic situations when they were laying it on the line with each other. They were standing one of them, Sky was standing in the bathroom after washing off blood from an injury. And Riven is just no, dude, this has to stop. You can't go on like this.
Right.
And I just felt like that's important for 2 guys to see 2 guy friends be honest, open, and vulnerable with each other in a non-violent and macho man kind of way. Right. I thought that was important.
Anna.
So I'm gonna say Dane, Riven, and Beatrice was and it's sort of like what they pulled out from each other sort of throughout, because we got a lot of that Dane and Riven friendship and sort of how they influenced each other and changed each other, and then throwing Beatrice into it and how her character evolved. I think they gave each other a lot. I mean, they also, they were bad influences on each other too, but they also were good influences on each other. And it was just always so interesting to watch them. I don't know. I just enjoyed their dynamic.
Yeah, they were getting something from each other other than the obvious.
Yeah.
It did work out that way.
Yeah.
Now,
and they really I think they in the end, I do think they made each other better. By the end of it. Not always throughout. But.
Yeah, not always while it was going on.
Yeah.
And here, Renita says that Tara and Muse's friendship was hard won. Yeah, that was.
It definitely was.
That was a tough one. At the end, when Tara blamed Musa for Sam's leaving. Well, we are getting. We do have to do this last question, but I know we are running out of time, or we're actually a little over time. But I would very briefly, we'll go down the line, and what would you like, aside from the ending, which Seska says, well, we needed one. What do you wish we could have learned in the show that we didn't get to see? And Seska, we'll start with you.
I really want to know what the deal is with Bloom's mom.
Okay, that's a good one. Marks.
Who sent those burnt ones and that's a shadow and those?
Okay.
Yeah, we feel
If
that.
they're connected. Okay, Evan.
Musa and the Mind Magic. That was it's especially her reaction to it. I'd love to see that more, have a chance to explore that more in the series. Of see if they'd done a season 3.
Okay. Kelly.
I kind of have to echo the Bloom's mom because I have a feeling that that's the web that connects everything, but we don't know and we won't. So,
Yeah, we won't know now.
Yeah.
Diana.
I want to see flashbacks from the teachers and headmasters, like past. I want to see actual flashback scenes.
Oh, okay. For further back, not just from, okay. And Anna, bring us home.
So there's that last scene where you kind of see each character at the end of the final episode. And when Stella's in the graveyard, there's like this shadowy thing that happens. And I don't know what that's all about. And also Bloom's mom, because I think it's all connected as well.
Right. I kind of assumed that shadow thing that we saw was the one that wasn't supposed to get out, that they were trying to prevent getting out, the one that Sebastian wanted to get out.
Yeah.
To end everything. So there would be a lot of trouble. Now, Renita said, yes, she wants an answer about the burned ones. So anyway, lots to talk about with this show, and only it's 13 episodes, and it's a shame that we won't get to go back and revisit that. But I do appreciate everyone being here tonight. Thank you so much. All of you are wonderful, and you've been a great panel. For anybody who watches this, who's been watching this while we've been doing it, thank you. Renita, as always, we bow down to you and thanks for joining in our discussion. And for anybody who watches it later, thank you very much. Coming up in December on the Track YouTube channel with, again, the link will be on the Facebook page. December 8th, we have our season 3 Buffy watch discussion. And then on the 14th of December, I will have an author interview with David Biko. So I hope that people will be able to join us for one of those things. In any case, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you being here, and we'll see you later. Good night.
Good night.
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 Night.